today many Americans are unaware of the balloon bomb offensive.
Most people don't know about the Japanese bombing in Omaha during World War II.
But as deadly and isolated as the Pearl Harbor onslaught was, it was not the only attack on United States territory during the Second Great War. They were Japanese balloon bombs, and hundreds of them landed across vast swaths of mainland North America, and in the end took the lives of 6 Americans.
From late 1944 to early in 1945, the Japanese launched thousands of these bomb-carrying balloons into the jet stream towards North America. The Japanese military gave them a secret code name, Project 32, also abbreviated as Fugo. They were designed to release some kinds of bombs over the western United States, creating devastating fires throughout the region.
The Japanese thought their best bet for doing damage in the western U.S. was to start forest fires.
In World War II, the Japanese were looking at a way to strike North America, both Canada and the United States, remotely. So what they did is they designed balloons using rice paper that could go up into the upper stratosphere and drift across the Pacific with the prevailing winds, and at a certain point deflate and release their bombs.
Mostly it was done by school children.
School children built these balloons?
A lot of them did, yes. They would go to school about half a day, and then they would disappear onto the manufacturer grounds of whatever they're assigned to do, in this case to make paper bombing balloons.
Now, how many of them did they make?
Roughly around 10,000 of them, of which they launched seemingly around 9,000.
And how many of them arrived in the United States?
Well, that's a good question. It's estimated maybe 1,000.
Although more than 300 Fugos did make landfall and start small fires, their greatest nuisance was to the American war effort, diverting resources like Sandy's mission away from overseas targets. One Fugo even delayed plutonium production for an atomic bomb destined to be dropped on Japan when it hit power lines in Washington state, knocking out power to the Hanford nuclear reactors.
Simple in its approach, but the technical ability of this bomb to be able to float to America and on its way be controlled by a series of sandbags that gets it to its target is incredible.
Someone had to sit down and run the numbers to come up with exactly how many sandbags, exactly how far they could project the balloon to move.
Over 1,000 were launched. They went as far as Texas, and as long as they stayed airborne, they could carry great distances. So depending on the wind and the altitude they maintained, they were falling all over Western America.
They were made entirely of rice paper, glued together with vegetable paste. But the paper bags were guided by an ingenious delivery system, and the engineers had now figured it out. Upon release, the balloons floated upward. As the sun heated the balloon, it would expand and rise. But if it expanded too much, it could burst. So a valve would open, releasing excess pressure. As night fell and the balloon cooled, it would descend. But if it dropped too much, it could crash. To prevent this, an altimeter would close a switch, igniting a charge. The blast released a pair of sandbags, lightening the load. When all the sandbags had been released, a final charge would release the bomb. Now that they understood how the balloons flew, the engineers were asking another question. Why did the balloons carry so many sandbags, enough to travel for several days and nights, if they were coming from the U.S.? Because they weren't coming from the U.S. The balloons were coming from Japan.
The Japanese hoped that media reports of where they blew up would help them to accurately launch thousands more.
In May of 1945, a minister, his wife, and 5 children from their parish
were out on an outing near a town called Lakeview, Oregon. The minister was parking the car. He'd let his wife out and the children. They went into the forest. He heard her exclaim, "Look what we've found." And seconds later, by the time he got up there, his wife, who was pregnant at the time and only 26 years old, and these 5 children were dead.
It's tragic to think just how unlucky this family was.
The only known deaths in the continental United States caused by the enemy during World War II.
The wrong place, the wrong time.
But the pieces of washi paper could only be produced in small, square portions, so they needed to be glued together, and that was achieved using an affordable and edible paste called konnyaku. However, the konnyaku created its own unique problem. Hungry Japanese workers stole the paste to eat as a readily available food source. But eventually, over 9,300 of these balloon weapons would be produced and launched towards North America.
That's partly because in January of 1945, the U.S. government instituted a censorship program designed to keep information about the balloon bombs out of the press. It's estimated that around 1,000 Japanese balloon bombs reached North America. Yet, as of today, only 389 have been accounted for. There's a very real possibility that many of these dangerous relics of a long-ended war remain hidden almost anywhere in the seldom visited forest and wilderness areas of the West.